Good morning, everyone. Today's class, I believe, is going to be the seventh and final class in this series on Karma and Rebirth. It's really been a remarkable series, and all of the recordings are on the website in one player. If you have a couple days, you can review them again. Let's just see who's this is that's coming up. We'll finish today on rebirth and dukkha, but the series really points to what you're taught is reflected in the teachings on karma and rebirth, and it just points to the importance of understanding what the Buddha meant by it. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Lisa. So again, today's I believe, it depends how long the discussion goes, but I believe this is our final talk on and discussion on karma and rebirth. And we'll get to the kind of the fine points of the meaning of rebirth and how that all relates to dukkha. But we'll meditate first for 30 minutes. So find your relaxed meditative posture and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And holding your back straight, but not stiff. Your ears aligned with your shoulders and nose aligned with your navel. And holding yourself very loosely, very lovingly. Allow yourselves to settle into this room. Settle onto your seats. Settle into your bodies. And settle into your minds. And take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body. Just get a feel for what that's like. To be mindful of your breath in your body. And while remaining mindful of your breath in your body, notice that thoughts are flowing. We're conscious beings. Thoughts should be flowing. The purpose of meditation is to not be distracted by your own thoughts. So when you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. I'll repeat that. When you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. Relaxing your thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. Meditate for 30 minutes with callbacks every 5 minutes. relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing.
Relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing.
Relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. Relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. If a persistent thought or feeling arises, stay with it for a moment or two. Recognize it as impermanent and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. And we'll meditate for 5 more minutes. Take a moment to notice the quality of your mind. Be at peace with your mind. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. So, see you Tuesday. Before I begin, Eva asked earlier when I started teaching meditation, and I gave kind of a flippant answer regarding some things that I was doing in Hawaii. Looking back now, the fact that I was doing these things is really what was absurd. It wasn't that what was being done was insincere in any way. And the reason why I say that is my teacher back then was this man named George Naopi. Uncle George is the honorable way of referring to people in Hawaii that are to be respected. He's a remarkable man. He's actually mentioned in the Smithsonian Institute. A master of many things, which was what kahuna really means. He was a master chanter. He was a master hula teacher. Kuma hula is what that's called. He was a master in his understanding of Hawaiian, and I'm using this, they would never use this word, but I'll use it because we'll understand it, of Hawaiian shamanism. And he really was a remarkable man. For some reason, he took me under his belt and under his tutelage. He's one of those people, everybody has 3 or 4 or 5 people that really influence them, and we're so fortunate to have. And he's one of those for me. He's passed now. But he taught me a lot, and the reason I was doing what I was doing was for a sincere reason, is we were trying to bring back the lost Hawaiian culture from the missionary influence and the government takeover. I'm not taking a political stand, but it happened. In fact, we got a grant from the University of Hawaii that eventually we lost for a series of events. Most of them were, I think, reasonable. When this was first proposed to me, I thought that it really was. I was in the wrong position to teach Hawaiian culture, and that there was going to be a lot of resistance to that. And that's really what proved to be true. The true Hawaiians, meaning those that had even a little bit of Polynesian blood in them, rejected the idea that here's a haole is the HAO. It's a derogatory term meaning a white boy from New Jersey is going to be teaching us and reintroducing Hawaiian culture. And it really proved to be true. It was a tough situation. But I didn't want to leave this that I was being disrespectful to George in any way. If you look him up, you can still see the name is George Naopi, Naope. You'll see his chants are just amazing, Hawaiian chants. His hula teaching, you'll see examples that I think you can still find. I haven't looked in a while. And hula is something that's really misunderstood. I'm sorry to get way off there. Hula is a way of communicating and storytelling by movement, and it's really remarkable. And I hate to put this picture in your mind, but he actually taught me how to do that. And again, not to be disrespectful, I took it very seriously. So you might want to look him up. You might even see a picture of me with hair down past my middle of my back. So that's all on that. So the 7th talk on karma, just to quickly cover what we say. Karma is a present moment unfolding of past intentional acts, and that word is important, intentional acts, moderated by the present level of our mindfulness, meaning what we hold in mind. And so if our minds are holding in mind the principles of the Eightfold Path, we'll be moving towards the cessation of karma, meaning past intentional actions impacting, which simply means we'll have resolved the problem of conditioned thinking. Right? And then I'm just going to go back a paragraph or 2 from where we left off last week. The Buddha taught that what is commonly believed to be a self is not founded in right view. It is a view of self conditioned by ignorance. Remember, ignorance is the beginning of the cause of all suffering. It is a view of self conditioned by ignorance that is to be abandoned if confusion and suffering is to end. distraction of dukkha is always present to a deluded mind, then an awakened mind is a mind free of karma and free of the karmic manifestations of rebirth. If you have any questions, just please ask. But I think I'm gonna focus mostly on reading. Yes.
Can you slow down a little bit?
Yes. Thank you. I'm reading quick because I want to get this done today, but I'd rather you all understand me rather than we finish it in 5 minutes. So thanks. Once karma ceases, there will be no more births. Does not mean necessarily future physical births. And I'll get into the clarifying that in just a minute. Without karma to create the unfolding need for continued existence, rebirth ends. The Buddha's understanding and teaching on rebirth differ greatly from the Brahmanism of the Buddha's time and differs greatly with many of the mystical Buddhist religions. The Dhamma also differs greatly from the Hindu and Hindu-influenced beliefs that would arise well after the Buddha's passing. Again, that's doesn't infer anything on Hinduism or modern Hindu religions. It's just different. Many religions, including some Buddhist religions, teach morals and ethics as a way of hopefully having ever more pleasurable future lives, but never abandoning conditioned thinking and continued eye-making. This is continued clinging to an idea of an ego self, and is specifically what the Buddha was referring to when he said, the Buddha is describing his awakening now. This was the third knowledge I attained in the third watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose. Darkness was destroyed, light arose. As happens to one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. Ended, the integrated life fulfilled, the task done. There is nothing further for this world. So what the Buddha is referring to is there's nothing left in him to continue to establish a self-referential ego personality in this world. And some people will take just that saying as meaning that when you awaken, poof, you just vanish. And of course, that's not what happened. The Buddha then lived for another 45 years teaching the Dhamma. He simply let go of any wrong view that would create an impermanent self-referential ego personality in the present life. He stopped giving birth to those things. And that leads directly to the most important teaching on birth. So reincarnation is the belief that an individual and permanent soul travels throughout time as the same spiritual entity, appearing in different physical bodies, life after life. That's the common belief. There's little slightly variations in that depending on the religion, but that's it. This cannot be reconciled with the teachings of not self, emptiness, dependent origination, 5 clinging aggregates, and karma. So going back to dependent origination, which is often completely misrepresented and presented then as a creation myth, we all know that ignorance, dependent origination simply describes the process that from ignorance of Four Noble Truths, suffering arises. There's nothing in there about physical births. And what the entire teaching is to be careful about what you're giving birth to, because if it's rooted in ignorance, you will give birth in the next moment to another ignorant moment. And that's really the most important teaching on all of that. The 5 clinging aggregates that I just mentioned are the personal experience of suffering resulting from that ignorance and the personal experience of karma unfolding. The self that would reincarnate has been shown to be an impermanent aggregate of physical and mental factors sustained only in the present instant by craving and clinging. So that last sentence, the last paragraph, the 5 clinging aggregates are an impermanent vehicle to experience life in the phenomenal world. And if that experience is rooted in ignorance, what we'll be experiencing through these 5 aggregates is moments rooted in that ignorance, so prone to confusion, deluded thinking, and suffering. But they're all impermanent. All of the factors that make up ourselves are impermanent. And so this leads directly to the notion of a permanent self reincarnating. If even in this life, there's nothing permanent that we can point to and say is me, we point to anything and say that same thing will reincarnate birth after birth after birth, all the way into the future and going all the way back into the infinite past. It just doesn't reasonably make sense. Even if we point to the notion, making a connection between the consciousness and the consciousness is somehow a soul, which is a real big, even a metaphysical leap, understanding how the thought process unfolds and keeps creating and recreating a self-referential ego self will show that even these thoughts are impermanent. So every thought that we'll have, even though we try to cling on to them, and that's really the problem with this idea of a clinging mind, because we're establishing ourselves in each thought that occurs. We create this clinging mentality to each thought, that each thought must be correct. It represents me. I can't let go of it. I can't change it. Well, that's really the underlying problem, isn't it? And as we meditate and deepen our concentration, we recognize the arising and the passing away of all things, including our thoughts, especially our self-referential thoughts. Is that clear? I explained that last sentence well enough? Okay. Insisting on reincarnating this same entity is insisting on the continuation of karma. And think about that. It is. I know that, you know, well, you might not realize it, but the life that you've created is rooted in ignorance, and insisting that this same continue is just insisting that this karmic experience continue. And you can certainly recreate the conditions for that give it the appearance of permanence, continuity. And the problem with continuity is continuity obscures impermanence. We keep recreating the same situations, which is obscuring the impermanent nature of all things arising and passing away. And when we can recognize that and relax into it, let go into it, then we cease holding on to self-referential views. And then everything that we've created about ourselves does vanish, and what's left is true reality. The Buddha did not teach a way of manipulating a more pleasurable future birth. He taught a way of leaving the recurring cycle of dukkha behind. This brings up the notion of annihilation. We talked a little bit about this Tuesday night too. Annihilation is an extreme view rooted in ignorance of anatta, the not-self characteristic. It is an ego personality's fear of annihilation that creates the doubt and reaction, as the ego personality is always vigilant about continuation. You know, that also refers to the 5 hindrances that we've talked about. But this self-referential ego self, especially when we're taken to a Dhamma practice that is challenging to that ego self, will create all types of scenarios and strategies to continue to ignore its own ignorance. And these can get very elaborate, and they seem very powerful. I know I'm having trouble talking today. They seem substantial, almost insurmountable at times. And the only thing we can do is to take a breath and come back into the present moment. Because the more we react to that doubt and uncertainty and resistance, the stronger it gets. The more we just stay present with what's occurring, noticing the arising and the passing away of even those types of strategies, the more quickly we'll move towards awakening. The more quickly we'll bring karma to cessation, the more quickly we'll cease giving birth to another moment rooted in ignorance. To go back just a sentence, it is an ego personality's fear of annihilation that creates this doubt and reaction, as the ego personality is always vigilant about continuation. This creates a need of establishing the ego self in the future. The most skillful way of considering karma and rebirth is to view karma driving the birth of this present moment. So as I said before, karma is the present unfolding of past intentional acts moderated by present mindfulness. In order to complete the path to awakening, to end craving and clinging, and to bring dukkha to cessation, giving birth to another moment of clinging to objects, views, and ideas is unskillful. It's a process rooted in ignorance. What is most skillful is to recognize the causes of continued confusion and suffering and to abandon those causes. This moment holds the potential to be free of confusion and suffering, and the next moment holds the potential for freedom, continued rebirth of anatta, the not-self characteristic. Is that clear? So this, again, this points to the potential of each and every moment, that what we hold in mind and what we're experiencing and our reaction or response to this moment will determine what we're giving birth to in the next moment. And again, continuity often obscures the importance of the present moment mindfulness. But that's really what that term means. And just to clarify that, there's no such thing as the present moment. And we shouldn't get hyper-vigilant about the present moment. I mean, we're even almost creating religions about the present moment. When the truth of it is, everything is in a constant state of becoming. And so to try and find a present moment in time is just going to be another distraction. But to be mindful of what's occurring, of our life unfolding moment by moment, is what's most important. And to frame that properly within the framework of the Eightfold Path is the essence of awakening. It's the essence of bringing karma to cessation. It's the essence of taking control of what we're going to give birth to. You tell that to my mom, she's going to have second thoughts. But when you abandon craving and clinging, your immediate future is free of confusion and suffering. I'm going to read that again. When you abandon craving and clinging, your immediate future is free of confusion and suffering. It's craving and clinging. Remember the dependent origination. It's craving and clinging that establishes the distraction of dukkha in our life as something substantial. Once we recognize it, once our thoughts are well concentrated and relaxed, stop that clinging nature, we're no longer craving and clinging for anything, including the maintenance of a self-referential ego self. The distracting questions rooted in ignorant views no longer arise. You are no longer experiencing the results of past karma, and there is no longer any ongoing birth of confusion and suffering. This is the most skillful way to consider birth, death, and rebirth. Potential for the next moment, the next moment's experience. Ignorance will bring more confusion and unsatisfactoriness. Refined mindfulness and deep concentration, developed within the framework of the Eightfold Path, brings profound wisdom and understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the ending of ignorance. Wisdom in this moment brings a life free of ignorance, confusion, and stress. It is a common reaction from an ego personality insisting on continued establishment of itself to continue to cling to form and resist or ignore the truth of ending rebirth. Shamatha must establish itself in every object, event, view, or idea. That's clear. That's how we continue to maintain ourselves, this ego personality. The ego self cannot accept any future thought or idea that does not include itself. Let's think about that. It's nearly impossible, and it's actually fooling ourselves, the next moment or the next week or the next year without it being a self-referential thought. Try it. That's self-referential ego self, by the way. That's anatta. An awakened mind free of craving and clinging peacefully experiences life as life occurs, with no limiting and stress-inducing self-referential thoughts, self-referential thoughts, or the actions that follow from those thoughts. As stated, the five clinging aggregates are the vehicle for the self that experiences dukkha. Self or conditioned mind is impermanent or empty of any permanent and individually originated constituents, meaning the five clinging aggregates, this vehicle that we're using to declare there is empty of anything that's permanent. There is no self and no karma other than a conditioned mind manifested due to specific causes and conditions arising in the phenomenal world, and those causes and conditions originate in dependent origination. The Buddha never taught emptiness as a mystical realm that somehow is both empty but also includes the phenomenal world. In the Dhamma, emptiness is taught in relation to suffering and the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha taught that one should empty oneself of clinging and empty oneself of ignorance. He taught that the five clinging aggregates are empty of any permanence or substance. He taught that one should empty the world of self and to cease eye-making. His words, karma should be known. The cause by which karma comes into play should be known. The diversity in karma should be known. That points directly to a dualistic, actually not a dualistic, an infinitely subjected reality. So it's not dual and it's not non-dual. The diversity in karma should be known means that we should understand the discreteness of all things that arise, not try to reconcile them into one false non-dual doctrine. The diversity in karma should be known. The result of karma should be known. The cessation of karma should be known. That relates directly to the Eightfold Path. The path of practice leading to the cessation of karma should be known. The Buddha concludes that with saying, in that phrase, thus it has been said. And then he asks this question, why was it said? This points directly to the second factor of the Eightfold Path, the Buddha's words. Intention, I tell you, is karma. The factor of the Eightfold Path is craving, of the Four Noble Truths, is craving originates and clinging perpetuates suffering. The second factor of the Eightfold Path is right intention, which is the intention to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. Intention is karma. If we want to end a karmic existence, we need to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. How do we do that? With the entire framework of the Eightfold Path. And we could talk, if you have any questions about that, please ask.
I do.
Yes.
So intention
having the right intention eliminates karma, but intention is karma?
Yes, because what we intend to happen will result in the unfolding of karma. In other words, non-intentional, we all do things that we don't have any strong intention behind. If our intention is to, holding in mind that intention, to recognize and abandon craving and clinging, we'll develop the entire Eightfold Path, and eventually we'll recognize all of the contributions we're doing, the actions we're taking, the intentional actions that continue karma in our life. So through that, and this really points to a subtle aspect of the Dhamma, and it came up Tuesday too. At times it feels like if we're diminishing I-making, we get confused with the I that's intending to create an awakened state, correct? It can be confusing. That's an extreme view. Intention occurs in each moment. If our intention is rooted in a mind that itself is rooted in ignorance, we can only continue ignorance. But that same mind can become rooted in the Eightfold Path, and then the intention, the action that is created by that, will move the mind towards awakening. So even within a life where karma is unfolding, right intention will bring us to the cessation of karma. Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Can you?
I guess it's still, I'm back to my original question, that is karma intention is the cessation of karma.
Yeah, so remember the definition. Karma is the present moment unfolding of past intentional actions occurring. They're unfolding in this present life, moderated by the present. So it's both of those components are karma.
And both are intention.
And both are intention. So what is my intention in this moment? If my intention is to knowingly or unknowingly ignore the Four Noble Truths, I can only hope to develop the karmic experience of confusion, delusion, and ongoing suffering. If my mindful intent is framed by the Eightfold Path, then even within the experience of karma unfolding, I can gain control of that and incline my mind towards awakening. And in that way, my intention within karma is to awaken rather than continue ignorance. And it's a very somewhat subtle but very important point. We have a choice of what's occurring to us. We have a choice whether we can awaken. We're not lost because of karma. When we recognize that we ourselves as individuals are the cause, the origination of our karma, originating in ignorance, then we can take control of that with a well-concentrated by the Eightfold Path so we can see things clearly.
So our intention is our power.
It's entirely our power. I have a friend, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years. We used to have this, when we talked more often, we used to have this kind of discussion. He insisted that intention had nothing to do with Buddhism. It's part of another school that believes that gods and goddesses will solve our problems. This is the essence of the Buddhist teachings. What we hold in mind is also intention. And we can use that intention in each and every moment. When things are occurring and we recognize the I-making in it, we talked about restraint a couple months ago. In that moment, we can hold the intention to practice restraint and recognize this is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am. Or at the very least, we can recognize that we've reacted in an unskillful way and generate the strong intention to not act that, to recognize that and not act that way anymore. And in this way, karma is directly an action that we're taking to counter karma, or to at least bring it to cessation. Excuse me. There's nothing magical or mystical about the Buddha's Dhamma. And by that specifically, I mean, there's nothing that at any time takes our responsibility or our own right effort away from awakening. What that means is that we're not here to gain merit from some spiritual system, meaning, oh, if I just do everything right, I'll get through this. The framework for getting everything right is the Eightfold Path. So it's not even so much as doing good acts, even though we will naturally do good acts if we're living within the framework of the Eightfold Path of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. That's a natural occurrence. It naturally flows from an awakened or awakening human being. But to see doing good acts as gaining favor to support our awakening without the framework of the Eightfold Path is simply more I-making. And that really, thank you, Howard, for that question, because that gets to the subtlety of the question. What's the intention behind my act, which is much more important than the act itself. And so, again, I don't want to get into the obvious example of this, but there's a lot of people that took actions thinking that they were wholesome, or at least it fulfilled something in their own mind, that were horrible to other people, to humanity as a whole. And sometimes, and again, forget about the elephant in the room for a moment. I think we've all had that experience where we intended to do something good and the result wasn't so good. And this isn't a hard and fast 100% rule, but often if we'll look at our intention there, it probably was to manipulate something in some way. And again, it's not, don't take away the extreme view. It's not moral or immoral, but it should be looked at as skillful or unskillful. And it all comes down to right intention. So intention really is everything. And notice where intention follows in the Eightfold Path. It's not linear in that sense, but it begins with right view. The profound right view the Buddha describes as a view that understands in a very profound and comprehensive way. Right view understands dukkha in all its manifestations. Following that is right intention. An awakened person living in right intention has recognized and abandoned all craving and clinging. So it really is the heart of it. Intention is karma. Yeah.
To Tom's point. So by not applying expectations, which we know creates dukkha,
Yep.
to our intentions, right view.
Right attention.
Yes.
Because that old cliche of the road to hell is paved with good intentions is by having expectations. Yes.
Yeah. And manipulations behind those expectations.
That's the. This time crazy. So if I am eating a healthy diet and running and jogging, and my intention is to be healthy, there's an expectation attached to that if we let it, right? That when I look in the mirror 3 months later and I don't look any different, I might not feel that good because of that expectation to that intention. And so this whole karmic thing, so are you saying what Buddha was trying to imply was that the intention should be void of any expectation? Or no? Am I missing the whole point completely?
Well, yeah, there's two things that you're talking about. Well, and also I should point out that we can very easily find in our own minds exceptions to these by taking an extreme view and fitting something that doesn't really fit. So what you're talking about, it certainly is, the Buddha even talked about, it's important to take care of ourselves physically, mostly for the sole reason so that we can live long enough to awaken. So there's nothing unskillful in eating a healthy diet. But putting an expectation on that is something else. It's just in the moment. Eating a pound of bacon or a whole chocolate cake is simply unskillful, but it's not for any spiritual reason. It's simply hurtful in this present moment. It's not a skillful way of living in the world. A piece of bacon or one piece of cake, and with the understanding that I'm being healthy, I'm not being gluttonous, I'm not being out of control, is a skillful way of looking at it.
Absolutely.
So eating healthily is a skillful way of living within the framework of the Eightfold Path.
I need to come to more karmic discussions. It's hard.
But ultimately, is it not that enlightenment means that we would then not need to act at all with any intention? I mean, ultimately, what the Buddha was able to accomplish, I have either misunderstood or not, is that he could, or that all what we are looking for is to, without having intention for any good or bad, and just kind of be.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
And
the
so
intention ultimately should leave us, or not.
Well, again, you're kind of getting into an extreme view.
Okay.
So it's like the online student asked me a couple months ago, why did the Buddha keep meditating after he awakened? I mean, why wouldn't he? It's a refuge even for an awakened human being. A fully developed Eightfold Path is also informed by right effort. It's not just right intention now. Right effort means that we engage in a skillful meditation practice, Shamatha-Vipassana meditation, and we continue to live our lives framed by the Eightfold Path. So as we develop the Eightfold Path as a framework for our life, I think most of us have had that experience. There's great freedom in living within that framework, because we don't have to be always considering in this moment, because we know if we're framed by the Eightfold Path, we're good to go. We're not going to be doing any harm to ourselves or towards others. But initially, the intention is an important part of developing the Eightfold Path. It becomes simply a natural expression of who we are. And using Tim's example, an awakened person might not be hypervigilant about what they're putting into their body each moment, but they would live their life in a way that's considerate of eating good food. It's just, you'd be free of craving, so you wouldn't eat, whole chocolate cakes or pounds of bacon or pots of coffee. It just wouldn't. It would be a natural expression of who you are. And it's interesting to point out, the Buddha died by eating a bad piece of pork. And it wasn't that he was mindless. In fact, there's an underlying, if you read the story closely, he may have even known that, but he did it because he didn't want to insult Kunda, who made the meal for him. And even after Ananda found out that the Buddha was dying because of this bad pork and wanted to go after Kunda, the Buddha said, no, he did that because of compassion. He cared for me. He made me a meal. And then he said, and it's time for me to go. He described the suffering that went along with eating that bad piece of pork. He wasn't above the suffering about it. It certainly wasn't a mindless act that he ate it. So it's a very good question. Again, we need to be cautious, vigilant about trying to find individual examples that contradict the teachings, because if you look at them, they usually have an attachment of a wrong view to it, such as the idea that it's good to have a healthy diet, to expect a result from that, an ongoing permanent result, is setting yourself up for suffering. Because no matter how healthy a diet you eat, at some point, things are going to start falling apart. Okay, let me continue. We're almost done with Karma and Rebirth. Yay, don't clap. Let me go back. Intention, I tell you, is karma. Intending, one does karma by way of body, speech, and intellect. And what is the result of karma? The result of karma is of three sorts, I tell you. That which arises right here and now, that which arises later, and that which arises following that. So there's a little bit of ambiguity. The Buddha is not specifically saying future lives, because he's not making that declarative statement. He said that what you decide and do intentionally right now can come to fruition right in this moment. It might happen tomorrow. It might happen 20 years from now, or it might happen 200 years from now. So the implication again is, if you want to cease any possibility of that type of uncertainty, wake up. Take to the Dhamma and wake up. The Buddha continues. I tell you is karma. Intending, one does... went back a page. And what is the cessation of karma? From the cessation of contact is the cessation of karma. And just this noble eightfold path, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation is the path of practice leading to the cessation of karma. There's no ambiguity. And the Buddha did this over and over again, pointing us back to the path to get our heads out of the weeds of all the other things that we might be thinking are the path, especially today. It's developed through the Eightfold Path. The Buddha continues, now when a noble disciple discerns karma in this way, the cause by which karma comes into play in this way, the diversity of karma in this way, meaning in the framework of the Eightfold Path, the cessation of karma in this way, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of karma in this way, then he discerns this penetrative, integrated life as the cessation of karma, meaning penetrative to insight into the three marks of existence and well integrated in the framework of the Eightfold Path. Again, re-emphasizing the importance of the Eightfold Path. With the cessation of karma comes the cessation of rebirth of the five clinging aggregates. So notice he's not talking about in the future. He's not talking about you got to live a good life and when you die. He's talking about right now in this present moment. The cessation of karma is the cessation of the 5 clinging aggregates, meaning the cessation of the personal experience of confusion, deluded thinking, and suffering. There's no longer any possibility for the experience because the vehicle isn't there. The self-created vehicle. Buddha would often describe as the confining space of a deluded mind. And that confining space, that vehicle, until we awaken, is almost out of control. Until we deepen our concentration and develop that refined mindfulness to take control of our own minds and take control of what our intention is in this moment. There's just a little bit left in the article, but I think that's enough of that. So the most important point about karma is what's unfolding in this moment, moderated by what we're holding in mind. And that points directly to the important teaching on birth and rebirth. What are we giving birth to in this moment? And with a well-concentrated mind, well integrated within the Eightfold Path, what we will give birth to will be free of confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering, or at the very least, will incline our minds in that direction. So that's really the summary in the last talk on karma and rebirth in the cycle. Yay! Thank you all for listening. So before we go around the room, is there any questions about today's talk? Yes, Liz.
John, you had said something obscures ignorance. What was the word? It began with a C.
Continuity. Yeah, it's what we use. In fact, continuity, maintaining continuity is the hypervigilant focus of a self-referential ego personality. That's what I mean when I say in every thought, word, event, and idea, the ego self, anatta, must establish itself in every one of those thoughts. Because then it creates this illusion of continuity, which obscures the impermanence or obscures the arising and the passing away of all things. So thanks for the question. It's important. Such an important question. And intention too. Boy, the 2 sisters really come through. Is that clear too about how that fits in?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, if you continually, if you live mindlessly, and around, like you say so many times that, and you say it in different ways, but ignorance will try to sustain itself.
Yep.
Constantly trying to sustain itself.
Yes, we're continually creating strategies that allow us to continue to ignore ignorance.
Justification.
Yep, all types of things. Hyper-busyness. You know, the world has really evolved in a perfect way to continue as the great distraction to keep us all going in that direction of dukkha. You know, think of all the things we do that are distracting. The most telling thing, the most obvious thing that shows that is how difficult it is to just sit and do nothing for a few minutes, isn't it? We're so conditioned sitting quietly and being mindful of the breath that it's so difficult to begin a meditation practice and very difficult to maintain it at times, isn't it? When all that it is doing nothing. But we have such a hard time doing it. And the reason is because the ego must maintain that continuity of self. It can't stand the idea that something's not going on that refers to itself. In this, is there? Until we take this simple act of being mindful of the breath and start creating other scenarios in our mind for what we should be doing during meditation, which is what the way a lot of meditation is taught, isn't it? Not just deepening concentration, to be doing things, or to use music or visualizations or all those other things. They're just, again, they're subtle forms in some ways, but they're still distractions. They're still trying to establish continuity, where at least in this few minutes, there should be nothing to distract. Yeah, the Buddha taught always, abandon those rituals. They're the real traps.
And kind of a shortcut would be contact causes karma, or because I know that there's supposed to be a contact.
Oh, yeah, well, and even according to dependent origination in that 12-link chain, that's the arising of a self. Born from ignorance giving rise to mental fabrications, but the actual experience of the self comes at contact, meaning contact with our senses. We don't have a self-referential view until something contacts our senses, do we? A mind that is rooted in ignorance, as soon as there's contact at the senses, starts interpreting that from the view of rooted in ignorance. An awakened mind interprets contact from changes the whole experience. That wise mind, rooted in understanding of Four Noble Truths, then understands there's nothing continuous occurring. Everything is arising and passing away. It's not using the veil of continuity to continue its own ignorance, and so to ignore karma, and so to also ignore what I'm giving birth to in this moment. It's up to me. And it doesn't mean that what's up to me is whether I breathe or not, or whether the sun rises and shines. That's another extreme view. What it really means is what I'm giving birth to is my own skillful response or ignorant reaction. It puts the fine line on what I'm going to experience in this moment. Of the normal physical functions in the world. I'm certainly not in control of other people, but what I am in control of, what brings a calm and peaceful mind through the understanding of the First Noble Truth, is my skillful response to what's occurring. Meaning, in that way, my mind is always at rest. It's always at peace, not reacting in any way. Or contribution to karma. So again, any questions about Karma and Rebirth? You can comment as we go around too. Tim, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you. Good to see everybody. Meditation practice has gone really well. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to restrain.
This is a spot.
There are a lot of tangents. The only thing I will say, I'm going to many of the Sanghas, and as I delve more and more into dependent orientation, its origination is it's simple, but the complexity of it, of this cause and effect, it really makes a lot of sense on all of the teachings.
Okay.
I will say that this particular has been challenging for me because I'm relatively new to this. So I look forward to it again with this insight that I'm getting. So thank you.
Thank you. What I would suggest, if you haven't already, is look at, I know you are, look at the Anicca, Anatta, and Dukkha again in relation to what you've heard the last 7 weeks, and that might help clarify. But it does take, it takes a little bit of time to fully integrate it, but glad you're here. Anthony, good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Saturday.
Happy
Good
Saturday.
to be here. I have nothing to add to this beautiful record.
Glad you're here. Jen, good to see you. Good morning.
Good to see you. Practice is going well. I don't feel like I have anything to add.
Glad you're here. Tommy, good morning.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to consider. I think the great challenge in my life is how to find the tools to calm myself, whether they are physiological tools or emotional tools, or any of those. I'm making progress. I would say progress is good. But recently, I had it's very difficult to describe, but it's a family situation that has to do with money. And I'm personally being attacked on many fronts in that area. The last thing I would do is, as I would say, let go and let God. This is where instead I have to marshal all my forces, resources, everything I have, and fight like very hard. It's a survival situation. And as one would protect one's home, one's family, one's situation, conversation is almost the antithesis of where any part of me is right now. And I just find it interesting that it's even a conversation in the environment that I'm now living in, because every day is lock and low. So, but I think it's a great balance, and I think it's a great consideration. But it is interesting how remarkably unbalanced that consideration is in my life right now. And that's all I have.
That's a lot. Thank you,
It is.
Tommy. Yeah, and all that we can do is to bring the guidance of the Eightfold Path into any situation, but also understand that the other parties we're dealing with likely don't have that and aren't going to be seeing things that way. That's the challenge. I'm glad you're here this morning.
Thank you so much.
Erica, welcome again. It's good to see you. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just thank you.
Thank you. Jay, good to see you. How are you this morning?
Very good. I've actually had some peace of mind the last month and a half.
Outstanding.
Fortunately, or unfortunately, it's due to the wonders of modern pharmacology. Doing a lot better.
Yeah.
Peace of mind is not inconsiderable.
Yeah, it isn't. I'm glad you're here today. Helen, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, good to be here. This helps me a lot because, some of you know I'm going through a divorce, and you can go along thinking you're okay and you've got a handle on everything, and then poof, something throws you off kilter. So it just helps to come back to understanding that letting go is a very powerful gift and tool. And so I'm working hard on letting go of a lot of things, mostly feelings. And it's been hard, but it's been as I said, sometimes I think I'm doing really well, and then it's like getting hit behind the knees, and then I get up, and this Sangha, this whole practice helps a lot. I'm very, very grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all that. And, it really is a refuge, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Eva, how are you this morning?
I'm well, thank you. And I just want to also say that I'm grateful to have everyone in Sangha to help me along my path.
Thank you. Lisa, good to see you this morning. How are you?
John, fine. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
It's always wonderful to be here because I feel it's like an antidote. There's stuff out there. Stuff, dukkha stuff. And it's like, I don't know, it's like an inoculation that just permeates the whole feeling of being here. And it's all in an indescribable way. I could say a lot more about that, but I want to mention something, and sometimes I don't always know. I feel like I'm just beginning to learn. Like millimeter by millimeter. But so right speech, I don't always know. So if you can correct me, but the thing you said about ate a pork because he didn't want to offend the person who was giving it to him.
Yeah,
Or he sort of might have had an idea. Maybe all this is speculation.
it is.
I know so little that,
On my end, it is too.
But and if he felt like that was his time to go anyway, and that was the way it was supposed to happen. But wouldn't it have been better but then the person had to live with the fact that he poisoned the Buddha. Is that what and having them say, I'm not sure about how good this is.
It's a really important question. The Buddha never said that he had any supernatural powers, meaning that he knew beforehand that he was going to eat pork and die that way. He simply ate it. And like all of us that have ever had food poison, it's at that point you realize you ate something that wasn't healthy to eat. And because he knew who cooked it, he knew who it was. the fact that maybe that he could have stopped Kunda from feeling guilt over it would be manipulating what had occurred. Again, the Buddha he wasn't supernatural in any way. It was simply what occurred. Because it's what occurred, he was at peace with it. Does that answer your question?
And then wouldn't Kunda have been supposedly enlightened enough to realize that he didn't do it intentionally? And
it may be. In fact, there's nothing in the suttas, and again, now it's obviously speculation. There's nothing in the suttas that said that Kunda ever found out that he poisoned the Buddha. And again, with an awakened mind, knowing it certainly wasn't Kunda's intention, and if he understood the Dhamma, he wouldn't feel he might have felt remorse, and I would. I mean, if I had no intention and I gave Anthony, I mean, I'm not picking on Anthony, something that made him sick, I'd feel awful about it. But I wouldn't feel any irrational guilt because I knew it wasn't my intention to make Anthony sick. But I would feel bad maybe because of my own lack of proper preparation or washing my hands or whatever it might be. So again, you ask a really important question, and then if you look at the question, it's taking really what occurred out of the context of the Eightfold Path. It's simply what occurred. The Buddha ate a bad piece of pork, and that's what killed him. But again, it wasn't the Buddha's intention to eat the pork to die, but he was also 80 years old. And if you read, one of these days I'm going to give a teaching on the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, but that one sutta encompasses the last 33 months of the Buddha's life. So if you think Karma and Rebirth was a long series, wait till we get to that. In the beginning of that sutta, or it might be, the Buddha knew just because he was getting old and things were happening to his body that he wasn't going to live much longer. And he was giving little clues to Ananda about that. And, start telling the monks that, the time is coming. And then within that time period, fateful dinner, and he didn't die immediately from that either. He lasted a little bit longer. Post time. For you? Yeah. There's a lot there. Okay. The important, hold on one second, and please remember your question because it's important. The important thing about karma is to remember that it's not something that is imposed on us in any way. And it's not really something that we create entirely. It's more of what's going on in our minds than anything else. So even that saying that the intention drives what's the present moment unfolding of our karma, it doesn't mean that I did something yesterday and that's why I'm here today. But what I did yesterday is going to influence or can influence what I'm experiencing today. And that's the quality of my conditioned mind. So the Buddha didn't do anything, and this might help clarify. The Buddha didn't do something in his past that determined that Kunda was going to give him a bad piece of pork. The karma would have been in an unawakened person's mind trying to take revenge on Kunda or if he was in a position of power to punish Kunda, because that simply doesn't relate to what actually occurred. He simply ate a bad piece of meat. It's the reaction to something that continues our karma. It's not necessarily what's occurring. Although it seems like, and most of us will agree, most of the events of our lives, especially the ones that we react to, seem like Groundhog Day. Seems like it's the same thing going over and over and over again. When it really is a completely discrete event that we're reacting to from a conditioned mind. So we're putting that sameness, that continuity onto it when it really doesn't exist there. Everything that arises is fresh and new. It's not something that is being rehashed, except our conditioned thinking looks at it that way. Is that clear, and does that help a little bit?
Well, a little bit. I just have, all these thoughts are coming in on that. I don't know why this is, evoked all these different thoughts, and my mind is, some of the things you said, my mind is going towards, sometimes people think that bad things happen to them because I must be punished. I'm being punished for something I did before, or maybe some religions
Most of them teach that.
teach that.
Yeah. And most Buddhist religions teach karma that way too. That's not how the Buddha taught karma. In fact, he taught it. The reason why Buddha taught karma and placed such importance on it is because it refuted a lot of the confused teachings of his time, which were related to that. That something bad happens, it's because you did something bad, in your lifetime or lifetime past, which also implies that if you do a lot of good things, you'll get a nice pot of gold at the end of that. Neither one of them is true. Karma is the present unfolding of past intentional actions moderated by our consciousness right now. And the best teaching on that as karma as being a type of some grand spiritual system of checks and balances or evening things out is Angela Miller, the murderer. I know I've told this story 100 times, but it fits. Angela Miller was a murderer who liked to cut people's fingers off that he killed and make a chain out of it. And so he had 99 of these bloody fingers hanging on his neck one day and walking down the street, and he sees the Buddha and he said, this guy's going to be number 100. And there's a long story about how they got together, but eventually they met up. The Buddha, Angela Miller was so taken by the Buddha's countenance and by what he first said that Angela Miller didn't kill the Buddha, obviously, and he listened to the Four Noble Truths. He awakened. He never harmed another person, and he did not have to suffer 99 deaths without the scales because his mind had cleared. And so it's not a series of checks and balances. It's not a spiritual system of balancing the scales in any way. It's not even a system of behavior modification. It has nothing to do with that, but a lot of confusion comes from that conditioned belief that karma is that whatever unfolds now is our karma, and it's either punishment or reward, and it has nothing to do with that. And that's the important thing to understand. So thank you for bringing that up. Go to Diane. Diane, good to see you.
I was thinking in what you were saying, one of the major functions of ego is to survive. And that's what ego will just do is try to keep surviving, keep us alive kind of thing. And in this situation that happened, it was like ego was trying to keep him alive, but the Buddha said it's okay. And I think, to me, that's a pretty important thing to, the ego is what's really I'm battling with all the time anyway. That's my conditioned thinking. When I can supersede the ego or go, just say, okay, that's ego, recognize it, call it what it is. And I think that's what I hear the Buddha doing, is saying it's my time. And I get thinking that way every now and then myself, thinking, it's like I almost know when I'm going to choose to die. And it's okay. It's something underneath it all. And to me, that's what the meditation brings to me, is to the moment. I just spent 2.5 months with my ex-husband that I hadn't seen in 35 years. He had a bone marrow transplant and asked me to help him through it. And I'm telling you, battles and stuff like that, there were a couple of times that, I remembered why I divorced him.
Sorry about that.
And, but then actually I felt a part of the Sangha the whole time I was down there. And I felt that I was okay, even though there were, it felt like there were, really tense moments. I mean, you can't believe the stress of something like that, but I continued my practice every day, and had a peace beyond understanding through each day, that what was happening. And it was about 3/4 of the way through it, I thought, oh my gosh, if I'd have known this guy, maybe I wouldn't have divorced him, because I knew how to handle myself. I knew my mind. And I knew my heart or my intention. And it really just kind of opened up a whole relationship with, with parents, siblings, and everything else. That's all. I'm just grateful for the practice. I'm grateful for the Sangha. I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Liz, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Diane. That just said so much. When you're with someone who's in that kind of tentative situation, it really brings a lot of things to light. So thank you for talking about that. My practice isn't going well. I find myself thinking about the Dhamma all the time in almost every situation I'm in, but I'm not getting to the cushion twice a day like I had been in the past. But I do think about it all the time, and I think about it in a lot of different situations. I think what I got from today was the idea of the continuity obscures ignorance, and I think that's really important. And my sister laughed, but I think about the Buddha at 80 during the time that he lived, and that who knows, maybe everyone was given that same course, but he was the only one that got sick from it. And maybe that was because his immune system was compromised at being 80 in a very difficult time and after having a very difficult life. So it could have just been, the condition of his physical body. I also think can lead to distraction to even try to figure it out. But, we're all at the beginning. Every day we wake up and we're at the beginning. So it's not, I've been coming for a while and I see new people come in and they're like, God, I just don't get it. And I've been coming for 14 years. And, there's still pieces of it that just are totally, I haven't had true insights about them yet. But it comes, and how the Buddha died is not all that important. It's how he lived. It's how he lived, and it's not that if you see a train coming down the track, you're so reduced to simple thoughts that you don't know enough to get out of the way of the train. Simply get out of the way of the train, and then, you sort of continue on with your life, and it's not, it's not something that you hold on to. Maybe for 20 minutes, but after that you calm down. So it is in the beginning every time we sit down and try, but if you keep coming, John is able to say things in so many different ways that eventually you pick up on that one thing you thought you would never get, because he simply said, continuity obscures ignorance. And then all of a sudden,
it's continuity obscures impermanence.
Did I say
You keep saying ignorance. But it's kind of the same thing.
It actually is the same
I'm just being nitpicky.
But you're right. Continuity obscures impermanence.
Okay.
But a misunderstanding of impermanence is rooted in ignorance.
Okay.
Which makes ignorance
There's another
keep
I
going.
might have just started my own philosophy. Anyway, thank you, John, for saying it 16 different
Thank you, Liz. The story of the Buddha's death to close, I think it'll be a good way to close this. Lorna, good to see you this morning.
Good to be there. Thank you for a wonderful teaching. Thank you, Sangha members, for coming this morning. And I really have nothing much to add today, so I'll just sit in noble silence.
Glad you're here. Debbie, good to see you this morning. How are you?
Good to see you too. It's good to be back. I had a beautiful vacation last week, but
Nice.
I missed this. But I have struggled with my practice, not doing it. I have been doing it. It's just my mind, I'm just always struggling. I think I need some of that pharmaceutical. It's always struggling to focus. Glad to be back here and to be able to wrap up this series. I missed one, but it was helpful. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss next week too because I have out of town visitors. But so I'm just really glad to be here and have the refuge that we've all been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad you're here. Brought it up. Our Saturday class 2 weeks from now, we won't be having one because we'll be on retreat. Thank you for a wonderful class and a wonderful series. All these talks are on in one player on one page on the website if you want to review any of them. The online students are getting a lot out of our discussion. They always do. So it is remarkable that our Sangha isn't right here. It's really all over the world. Not that there's millions listening, but there's a fair amount of people that are getting a lot out of what takes place by our discussions here. A quick announcement, our retreat begins less than 2 weeks. There's just a few beds left, so if you're coming, sign up now. If you haven't sent in your money, please do that as soon as possible. Donna dinner is on the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. Our next Donna dinner, that's November 21st. There's info on the Cross River Meditation website about that linked at the top, but I hope you all come and join us. We're looking for some volunteers to help set up and break down. There's a list of appropriate gifts, and we're also going to take up a donation. I'll get a basket out there. We'd like to maybe donate at least a couple $100 towards Love and Oven, just to help to pay for the staff. Julie's been incredibly generous, but she shouldn't have to take that on herself. So I'll get a basket out on that. So I think that's it. We'll finish with the Buddha's words on metta. I was going to say, so that story about the Buddha's death and how he died, the best way to do that, and Liz said this, is just to look at it for what it is. Don't look for anything else into it, because that's the importance of it. It's just how an awakened human being died, and it's exactly how all of us awakened human beings are going to die. It might not be from a bad piece of pork, but it's going to be something, The Buddha knew that. He never thought that he was going to. In fact, the first thing he said when he awakened is, my last life, I'm not going to be here anymore, because he solved the problem of causing rebirths. So the last words the Buddha said, when Ananda fully got that the Buddha's going to die and he's going to die very soon, he got in a little bit of a panic, and he said, you need to give us one last teaching. What are we going to do without you when you're gone? Who's going to guide us? And he said, let the Dhamma be your guidance. And he said, I'm not like a teacher with a closed fist. I've held nothing back. I've given you everything you need to know. And then he said, impermanence and decay are relentless, meaning we never know when the end's going to come. Impermanence and decay are relentless. Strive diligently for your own awakening. Nobody else can give it to you. Those are probably the most important words that Buddha ever taught, aren't they? Karma unfolds. So we'll conclude with metta. So find your relaxed meditative posture and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body, and let that mindfulness of your breath cease any distracting thoughts to the past or to the future, or that may have arisen from our talk today. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. Be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class. Peace.
Thanks for those meditations, John. I've already used the 15